Hello everybody and welcome back to Physic Talks. Today I have my first ever top 10 video. We are going to be looking at my top 10 horror films from 2010 to now. A lot of these films on this list are simply fantastic and I can't wait to recommend them to you. Hopefully you guys can enjoy them. This list is up on IMDb. I'll put a link to it in the description. Along with the list I have added a mini review to each of the films, and I also have a scariness rating for each one. So if you're not that into scary films, or you are into scary films, that might be a good way of determining whether it's something you would want to watch or not. I will also be creating a list on IMDb which includes all the films you guys have recommended to me in my streams and all the films I want to recommend to you. It'll mostly be films that I haven't seen either, so we can get a good list circulating of films that everyone has recommended to each other, and hopefully we will have a vast catalogue of wonderful films to watch. I've been very impressed with some horror lately. As I've said in the past, you really only get maybe one or two fantastic horror films in a year, and I don't think that's an exaggeration at all. A lot of them are debut films from these directors, and that's just fantastic. For these to be some of the first feature-length films these guys have ever made, it's quite incredible. So without further ado, let's jump into this list. If I keep changing clothes throughout the video, it's basically because this has taken me a while to record and I've had to do it on several different days. First off, there are some films I won't be including on this list, and by the time you get to number one, you'll probably be wondering where these films are. First, we have Mother by Darren Aronofsky, a fantastic film. It is brilliant. It's a very mysterious drama with a lot of commentary on religion. Some people say it's incredibly blatant, and I agree to some extent, but I think the sheer insanity of the film, the incredible way that it was filmed, the amazing set direction. It must have taken a very long time recording this film, and I think it's incredible for what it is, but I just don't see it as a horror film. I think it kind of got marketed as a bit of a horror film, and I don't see it as that. Whilst it is incredible, and if it was a horror film it would be way up there, I just don't see it as horror, but definitely check it out. Next we have It Comes at Night, another film that was absolutely marketed as a horror. I think a few people were let down when it was released because it just wasn't what they thought it was going to be. A lot of the scenes they used in the trailer were just from dream sequences in the film, and that really upset me, and I think the film would have got a lot more credit if it was marketed right. I see it more as a psychological thriller with a post-apocalyptic theme to it. It's an incredible film about paranoia and how it can tear you apart, and it asks a lot of questions about how humans would react in this situation. The film becomes very claustrophobic because you only see from the main character's point of view. When other characters get involved, you never see things from their perspective, and I think that's a wonderful choice for making this paranoid feeling. As well as that, the director chose to change the aspect ratio at different points throughout the film. Mainly through the dream sequences, but as it got towards the end of the film, the aspect ratio would get even smaller when it wasn't in a dream sequence, to kind of show how the real world had become much like these nightmares. Really good, absolutely fantastic, definitely check it out. Next we have Raw. Raw is it's lovely, it's wonderful. It's an erotically charged coming of age story like nothing you've ever seen. It's got weird cannibal elements and body horror elements, but I don't see it as a pure horror. It just isn't, and I want this list. I've got enough films to be putting on this list as it is, so I'm going to exclude these three for not being horror, but I desperately recommend you guys to check them out, because as I say, if these were horror they would be right up there. Very good films. So, starting off the list, we actually have 15 entries. I find when I'm doing a top 10, it's difficult making a list and excluding certain ones. So you can call these runner-ups, or you can just call it an extra 5 to the top 10. So right at number 15 we have a very surprising entry, and this is The Void. The Void is a wonderful David Cronenberg-esque kind of body horror film. I've only seen it very recently. It was made in 2016 and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It did a lot of things that films these days don't do. That's, for a start, having an interesting body horror theme to it. It has some wonderful prosthetics, makeup and costume design. There was no CGI used from what I could see anyway. It had a very mysterious and surreal plotline. It had cultish elements. I grew attached to a lot of the characters. I really disliked a lot of the characters as well, but I think that's kind of the point. But you really don't see this kind of David Cronenberg style these days. It really reminded me of films like Videodrome, and that was nice. That was nice. It was nice to see that. And I love the way they did the costume and set design. It looked fantastic with some wonderfully bizarre and surreal creatures and monsters. Just fantastic. I really recommend you guys check this one out. It is a gem. So moving on to number 14. So next up at number 14 we have Goodnight Mommy. Goodnight Mommy is a Swedish horror mystery film made in 2014. This is a very interesting film. I believe it's Swedish. It just has a very creepy, mysterious element to it. And I'm not going to say too much about it, but what I will say is it's very unique. It's very creepy. There's a lot of tension, and there's a good twist at the end of the film that I didn't see coming at all. I'll give Goodnight Mommy a 6 out of 10 in terms of scariness. It's not too scary, it's more creepy, but it does that creepy element very well. At number 13 we have the Autopsy of Jane Doe. This was made in 2016. It's a part horror, part mystery kind of thing. I just thought this was such a unique idea. It is entirely set in a morgue. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 scenes that are set outside, and basically it's a father and son who are both coroners, and they get pulled into this bizarre mystery plotline where a woman is delivered to the morgue from the police. They analyze the body, and the further they get with the body, the weirder things become. This is a very unusual body. There are things about it that simply don't make sense, and the further they go with the autopsy, the weirder things become. Paranormal events start happening in the morgue, and I just think it's a really unique idea and a good amount of fun. You'll find that with a lot of films on this list. A lot of them are very unique and very original ideas. In terms of scariness, I will give it a 6.5. There were some moments that did get me quite well, but it's not the most scary film in the world. At number 12 we have a film called We Are Still Here. This was made in 2015. In the cold wintry fields of New England, a lonely old house wakes up every 30 years and demands a sacrifice. Now this film, whilst the beginning is a little bit slow paced, towards the end it is absolutely mental, and that's what I love about this film. It is no holds barred, pure terror and horror, and I really like that about it. Also to note, it has the same actor as Until Dawn that played the flamethrower guy. Thought that was really interesting. It was bizarre seeing him as an actual person instead of a rendered model, but yeah, I thought this film was pretty great. It had some fairly scary moments, and it's just the pure insanity of it that I loved. It's very violent, very gory, and a good amount of fun. The reason why it's not further up on the list is that I think the characters could have had more depth, and the story could have had more depth as well. Coming in at number 11, The Blackcoat's Daughter. This was made in 2015, and it is the most recent film I've seen on this list. What I have here is, perhaps I have a thing for the devil, but this is yet another film that takes a look at the devil and the power it can have over us. It is a slow burn, but well worth it at the end. I thought this film was very unique. It was very slow and quite artsy in the way it was created. Really enjoyed it though, really did. It was again quite a unique film, and towards the end there is a really good payoff. I think this isn't for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. In terms of scariness, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's not that scary, it's more horrific and filled with dread. Right, now we're actually onto the top 10. So at number 10 we have Under the Shadow. This is an Iranian horror film that is very similar to the Babadook. Now I don't think I've seen many Iranian horror films. This is based in war-torn Tehran of the 1980s as the war was going on. So it's about a mother and a daughter who don't want to leave where they are staying whilst the war is going on. Everyone else is evacuating and they're some of the only people that are left. And I just thought, that is such a unique and interesting idea, a unique and interesting setting for a horror film. Very similar to the Babadook in terms of the slow descent into insanity, the child that can see these horrific things and the mother that doesn't believe her. But I loved this film and I thought it had some genuinely frightening moments. It was very chilling, for want of a better word. But I would say that this is one of the scarier horror films I've seen in recent years. There's something about the way it did the scary moments. It has a very unique creature in it as well, so look forward to seeing that. In terms of scariness, I will give this an 8 out of 10. Next on the list is Kill List, coming in at number 9. This was made in 2011, so it's one of the older films on this list. And this is a film by Ben Wheatley, who also made a film called Sightseers, but I haven't seen that yet. That looks like a really funny film in a black comedy kind of way. A very original idea. This film is designed to make you ask questions. It has an incredibly ambiguous plot that will take you in many different directions. This plot is very interesting, and it's designed to make you ask questions, and that's one thing I like about this film. It doesn't hold your hand in any way, shape or form. It was surprisingly insanely violent, and I say that because the violence was incredibly realistic. It wasn't like Saw. I don't squirm when I see Saw because it's so over the top, or I don't squirm when I see a Quentin Tarantino film because the violence is so over the top. In this film it was very realistic and gut-wrenching. Yeah, the plot is completely mental and it gets more and more bizarre towards the ending. But yeah, I really liked the idea. I liked that it was British and based around 2 hitmen. It's got 2 actors I really like. One of the actors has been in Black Mirror before, and another of this chap's films, which I haven't seen yet. A Field in England, I think it's called. Yeah, really good though. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Scariness, I'd say 5 out of 10. It's one of the least scary films on this list. Very accessible if you're not into terrifying films. Next up at number 8 we have Get Out. Now Get Out was made in 2017. It is a fantastic film and you're probably thinking, whoa, number 8? That's a bit low down for Get Out, but what I will say is the further we get up on this list, the closer the films get in terms of quality, so there's really not too much difference between what's at 8 and what's at number 1. And personally for me, I just preferred the ones higher up a little bit more. I will say that it's an incredible film, it really is. It has a very unique and clever story that really makes you think. It's got a lot of social commentary, but it doesn't shove it in your face, it doesn't force it upon you. It has some interesting commentary on race and characters that I grew attached to. It even has this comic relief character that is genuinely funny and doesn't at all distract you from what's going on. The only things that let it down, I think there are some problems with the script. There are some issues with unnecessary jump scares that really should have been left out. I really recommend this film. It is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, make sure you go and see this one. Next up at number 7 we have a Korean film called The Wailing. Now this film blew me away, and I had only recently found out about it. It's annoying that I hadn't heard about it sooner because it's so goddamn good. The synopsis is, soon after a stranger arrives in a little village, a mysterious sickness starts spreading. A policeman, drawn into the incident, is forced to solve the mystery in order to save his daughter. It's quite a long film, and at no point throughout the film was I able to predict what was going to happen next. It leaves you constantly asking questions that all gets answered towards the end, and the ending is it's just incredible. The film starts building and building and building to that final point, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of interesting ritual stuff, there's a lot of shamanic stuff in it, and I find that stuff really interesting. There's a few films on this list that delve into those kinds of topics. In terms of scariness, I'd give The Wailing maybe a 4 out of 10. It's not so much scary as it's very intense. It fills you with dread. Towards the end there's some really uncomfortable, violent moments. At number 6 we have The Babadook, made in 2014. Now, if this is the type of film where all you have to say about it is, "Oh, wasn't that scary though, was it?" then I'm sorry, but you've completely missed the point. This is a horror film unlike anything I've really seen before, and it speaks to me in many ways. I can very much relate to a lot of this film. This film is essentially about grief and depression. The film has some wonderful metaphors that explain this. The synopsis says, "A widowed mother, plagued by the violent death of her husband, battles with her son's fear of a monster lurking in the house, but soon discovers a sinister presence all around her." And I say, The Babadook is a wonderful horror drama. I have a big thing for horror dramas, and this is one of the best. Some fantastic performances, original ideas, and nightmarish imagery. So if you're someone that can relate with depression and grief, you will absolutely connect with this film. The monster in the film is very much a representation for depression and the effects that it can have over us, and it's wonderful. It's just wonderful, and it is quite scary. That's the thing, it does have some pretty scary moments. In terms of scariness, I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. If I was to go into tiny digits, it would be something like 6.8, but I'm not going to do that. So that's The Babadook, check it out. Okay, we're right up at the top 5 now. So coming in at number 5 we have The Devil's Candy, made in 2015. A struggling painter is possessed by satanic forces after he and his young family move into their dream home in rural Texas in this creepy haunted house tale. It's not... what? It's not a haunted house tale. Don't listen to IMDb. Sorry, that's a terrible description. The film centers around Satan, actually. It has nothing to do with the haunted house. Yes, this film is to do with Satan and the effect that Satan can have over us. The idea is that it's not about this horned, big red devil type thing. It's about how Satan actually works through us, through people, and that is the way that he can pull off his wicked acts. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Some wonderful cinematography. The main family are metalheads. I think that's cool. That's definitely not a reason to put it so high up on the list, but it's a cool aspect of it. I found myself able to very much connect with the characters. I think a lot of horror films these days are lacking characters, so that's a very special thing for me these days. Some great performances, just a wonderful plot line. It's brilliant. I really enjoy it. I think it's a very underrated film, so absolutely check it out. It's not so much scary as it is very disturbing. So in terms of scariness, I'll only give it a 5 out of 10, but it's more disturbing how the devil is working through these people to pull off such hideous deeds. Up at 4th place, from Robert Eggers, we have The Witch. This came out in 2015. I'm sure you guys are probably waiting for me to mention The Witch, but yeah, it's bloody brilliant. The synopsis says, a family in 1630s New England is torn apart by the forces of witchcraft, black magic, and possession. Again, another film in which it displays how the devil can work through us, through people. The Witch feels like you are watching something you really shouldn't be. It's very dark, very disturbing. The dialogue is taken from a lot of real excerpts of actual New England vocabulary, so it's very old English type of dialogue, but the dialogue is superb. It's brilliant. It's like poetry when you listen to it. Absolutely fantastic. Some stunning cinematography. I wasn't the biggest fan of the color palette. It's very grey and brown and muddy, but that kind of, I think that's kind of the idea because of the setting it's in and the themes going on. Yeah, very disturbing film. just brilliant, really brilliant. It builds and builds and builds, and it gets more and more intense and dark and disturbing and twisted. And this is a debut film from Robert Eggers. A debut film! And it's got to 4th place in my top 10 horror films from the last 2 decades. Incredible, just incredible. It's not that, again, much like The Devil's Candy, it's not the scariest film, so I'll give it a 5 out of 10, just like Devil's Candy, but it is disturbing, it really is. Coming up in 3rd place is the most recent film on this list. It is Hereditary, made in 2018. After the family matriarch passes away, a grieving family is haunted by tragic and disturbing occurrences and begin to unravel dark secrets. Whew, this film blew me away. I had high expectations already because it was getting rave reviews around the festival circuit, but it blew those expectations sky high. This is again a debut film from Ari Aster. It has some, I'll go as far as say, ingenious cinematography, unlike anything I've seen before. Basically, one of the main characters, played by Toni Collette, the mother of this grieving family, she creates models, like for dolls' houses and things like that. So some of the establishing shots, so that's usually a shot taken from outside the place where the scene is going on. Some of the establishing shots are of a doll's house version of the house that they're in. I think it's genius. You can see that in the trailer where there's a doll's house and it starts zooming in on one of the rooms, and that's actually where the scene's taking place. It's brilliant and really, really clever. Wonderful cinematography, a lot of gorgeous scenes, but very, very disturbing film. Very disturbing. It gets more and more mental, but this is absolutely a horror drama, much like the Babadook. Is more about how grief can tear a family apart, but this is one unlucky family, and it's one of the most realistic paranormal ghost stories I've ever seen, because Toni Collette's character is the mother, a grieving mother, and she just wants to connect with her daughter, but she goes about it by trying to perform a seance and things like that, and things progressively get more and more out of control. This is a scary film. It's one of the scariest films on this list, in my opinion. It's hard for me to get scared by a film, but at the end of the day, what scares you is very, very subjective. So you can't always say what will be scary for me will be scary for you. But because of the realism of this film, that's what scares me. Very realistic situations, like Hereditary. It's, as I say, one of the more realistic paranormal films I've ever seen. It did it in a wonderful way, and the drama elements are fantastic. Toni Collette and Alex Wolff pull off some wonderful performances in this. So in terms of scariness, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Definitely check it out. I was so impressed by this film. I really was. Up at number 2 now. We're nearly at number 1. This is a very recent film that I've watched. It's called A Dark Song, and it was made in 2016. Now, this list is about the films that I enjoy the most subjectively. I'm not necessarily saying these are the best films in terms of the way they're produced, because some of them, I mean, this is another debut film coming from Liam Gavin, and it's wonderful. It's bloody brilliant. I was so impressed by this. A determined young woman and a damaged occultist risk their lives and souls to perform a dangerous ritual that will grant them what they want. I've never seen a film like this. You can absolutely say that this is the most accurate occult horror film that's ever been created. The rituals and the occultist stuff, the theology behind it, it's all incredibly accurate to real life. I've never seen rituals done like this in films. It is spot on. It really is. And so that's one thing you should be giving this film accolades for. Aside from that though, the music is incredible. I'm a big fan of music, if you haven't guessed already. I love music, I really do. So when a film has fantastic music, it makes it something a lot better. Yeah, I think this film is criminally underrated. Again, this film has some wonderful characters, some very damaged and fragile characters. So it's about this young woman and a really messed up occultist who is the guy that's going to be taking her through the ritual so she can speak to her dead son. And they have to go to a house, an empty house in the middle of the countryside. It has to be the perfect house. Once they have the house, they need to set everything up, put a salt line around the house, and then they're stuck in that house until the job is done. They cannot leave. And from that, you have this wonderfully bizarre setting, 2 people in one house for the whole film, and the ritual is slowly tearing them apart because they're not getting any sleep, and they're not having any food because they have to fast and stay awake to perform these rituals. So they're like back-breaking rituals, slowly tearing apart their souls, and I think it's wonderful. And the Damaged Occultist is brilliant. Apparently this is the first big film this guy has been in. His name is Steve Oram. I think he does a wonderful job as this alcoholic, depressed, lonely guy who's a bit of a bully as well, but it's just great. I really like it. I really recommend you guys checking it out. It's not incredibly scary. It's very subtle in the way it does its horror, and that's very important to me, subtlety. The same with Hereditary. That had some very subtle scares in it, and so does A Dark Song. It's again more about the drama side of things, how grief and anger are tearing both of these people apart throughout the film. So check it out, it's really good. Right, here we are at number 1, guys. Whoa! I think you guys know what's coming. I'd be surprised if you didn't at this point, especially if you watch my streams. This is It Follows, made in 2014. Whoa, I love this film. I love this film so goddamn much. A young woman is followed by an unknown supernatural force after a sexual encounter. Yes, it's a ghosty, sexually transmitted disease, and what a concept. So, this supernatural force is a being that will follow you until it kills you, and then it'll move on. But it won't stop. It will not stop until it gets to you. It doesn't move quickly, just walking at a slow pace, but it doesn't stop. And I think that's a terrifying concept. Once you see that in a film, it is shocking. So, for me, I look at films down to cinematography, the music, the way it's directed, camera work, set design, acting, all the important stuff. Cinematography, just gorgeous, so bloody brilliant for this type of film. I was really impressed by the cinematography. The music is my favourite horror soundtrack of all time, easily. It's up there with Blade Runner's soundtrack. I know Blade Runner's not horror, but that's what I'm saying. In terms of all films, this is one of my favourite soundtracks. It's this wonderful synthy 80s kind of sound that echoes back to 80s horror. The concept is fantastic. It's genuinely scary. I think it's easily one of the scariest films on this list, if not the scariest. The concept alone is terrifying, but then it's the way it's filmed, it's the way the music builds around each moment. Yeah, I think it's really fantastic. It has some wonderful performances. David Mitchell is knocked out of the park with this one. It's just incredible. I really recommend you guys checking it out. I know a lot of people are probably going to have a problem with me putting this first, but I simply don't care. At the end of the day, these films are about what I have personally enjoyed. This is my top 10. So you may not agree with these, but I don't care, because in my opinion these are my favourite films. It's subtle when it needs to be and intense in other moments. It has some incredibly intense scary moments, and I think it's just brilliant. I think the characters, the group of friends, they all have great chemistry with each other. As I said, their performances are good, and I grew very attached to these characters. There's not really any way you can say It Follows isn't a good horror film, because it does everything wonderfully in my opinion. The music, cinematography, the plot, the way it was performed, all that kind of stuff I loved. There were certain areas where it didn't have as much depth as I think it could have done. That's with the characters themselves, but they performed well, but they could have had a bit more character. I think the plot could have had a little bit more depth, but I think for what it is, it did what it needed to do, and it did it really well. So there is my list, guys. It's finally finished. I've been spending a long time working on this. I hope you've enjoyed watching today, I really do. As I say, if you want, the full list is up on IMDb. There's actually a 16th entry, which is Ghost Stories. You guys should check that out as well. If I hadn't have finished my list before adding that, it would have been further up on the list, a lot further up. It's a British horror film, kind of an anthology type thing, but it's, again, unlike anything I've seen before, really, really brilliant. It's a shame that I watched it too late. Yeah, a link to that IMDb list will be in the description. I have my mini reviews for each one and the scariness ratings there as well. So, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you've enjoyed, please do leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to help support me and my channel. If you got this far in the video, thank you so much, because the videos like this are the ones I care about a lot. So I really appreciate having the support from you guys. Thank you very much, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care now.